So here's our little pattern. So you can see I've drawn my little, this is where the curve is going to start. If we follow the curve all the way up there, crossing my finger, this is my serger. You have your foot here that you can raise and lower. All I do is I'll put my fabric right here at the beginning. Go ahead and start pushing the gas pedal, and I'll feed it through. Okay, I'm all done. I got my edges serged here. So the first thing I have to do is figure out, okay, what's going to be the inside of the fabric and what's going to be the outside that goes towards the ground. I'm actually going to use the less slippery side, which you guys probably won't be able to tell this, but there's kind of a dull side and then there's a side that's a little bit more shiny. The more shiny side I'm actually going to have out towards the ground. The dull side I'm going to have in because it's a little less slippery, and so I shouldn't move around as much on that side. So the next thing I need to figure out is how I'm going to attach both my shelf and my bug netting. The first thing I've done is I've got to figure out where my lengthwise center is, so that way I can center my shelf that I'm going to build. I've gone and folded it over and laid it all out again, matched up the ends, so I know that my center is right here. I'm actually going to use burgundy ripstop to make the shelf. Because this fabric is kind of slippy, it started sort of slipping around on the table on me. Not the lower part, the part that's on the muslin stayed nice and flat, but the part that's on the top wanted to sort of slide off because of weight. So what I've done is I've put down these little pin cushions that I have on here to help me sort of keep it stable. You can use anything you want. You can even grab, you know, a book or whatever you want, an old shoe, something like that to hold it down for you. And just kind of keeps everything in one spot. So especially because what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over so that I have room to sort of figure out, you know, how's my shelf going to work and all that. So we've got our burgundy fabric laid out. The ripstop has some really great grid lines in it, so I just made sure I was really straight along this edge so that I know that I am perfectly centered and everything. I went ahead and I started laying out my shelf here. I knew that I wanted to be about halfway. I have it kind of blend in about halfway up because when I'm laying in it, you know, my head's probably going to be roughly here. My shoulders will probably be, you know, somewhere in here, and then, you know, laying down and everything. So I kind of knew that's where I wanted to be. So half of 140 is 70, and then half of 70 is 35. So that's how I figured that out. Okay, now how wide do I want my shelf to be? Probably the width of a standard paperback book would be about, you know, how wide I want it to be. And I'll have to include, you know, seam allowance when I actually officially cut this out. So I used my Anne McCaffrey's White Dragon, which I love that her Dragon Rider series. And then I started just kind of drawing everything out. You know, how is it going to look if I do that? I'm going to want two pull-outs here so I can tie them, you know, have some cord off of here so it'll keep it nice and extended. And then you can see it just has a nice gentle bend back into the hammock. So at this point, honestly, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to try it, and if all else fails, I can take it apart. So not a big deal. I can, you know, have a seam ripper, and I am well versed in the execution of the seam ripper. So that's how it looks. These little dots here are actually where my stitch line is going to be. I'm actually going to make another burgundy piece that's going to be a top piece that I'm going to use this bottom piece as a pattern for, and then I'm going to use again that homemade bias tape along the edge here to kind of keep it, because, you know, I'm not going to put a lot of things in the shelf, so I'm not too worried right now about the weight. And then also I'm going to figure out how I'm going to attach my bug netting to this too. So okay, so my next step that I need to do is I need to just go ahead and mark right along this edge here where the fabric meets. Now I'm going to have to figure out, you know, seam allowance. Now for that seam, I'm actually going to use a flat felled seam. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 inches so that I can do a flat felled, so that accounts for it folding over and under in there. So once I lift up this blue fabric, then I'm going to have to add 2 inches to the burgundy fabric to get where I would cut it. Okay, so I've gone and removed the blue fabric. The blue fabric was sitting right here, okay? And like I said, I'm going to do a flat felled seam. Now I initially thought I'd do an inch wide flat felled seam. I think I'm actually going to pull that back to a 1/2 inch flat felled seam. So that means I'll only have to add an inch to my fabric here. So what I do is, this is great, it's a see-through ruler, which is awesome. So I'll add an inch to that, and all I do basically is just go along here and add an inch. And I'm only adding an inch to this seam because that's the seam that's going to have the flat felled seam on it. So that's really all there is to it. So I'm going to keep going and I'm going to cut this out and then we'll work on the top part. Okay, I went ahead and got it all cut out now, so I'm actually going to go ahead and serge it now. Okay, so I've gone and serged everything. So now I'm actually going to work on cutting out my top side. Again, I've gone on the fold here. One thing that I wanted to point out though that you want to do is, so this is going to run the length of my hammock. One thing that you'll notice about fabric is that fabric has grain in it that runs a certain way. So I want to have the grain that I'm doing for this match up with the grain that I had for my hammock, so that way as things move and stretch, they're going to stretch and move the same way. One thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to run some guy lines that will run up to my ridge line from here that will help support the weight of both the top part of this shelf and also the bug netting as I get it up. So and the other thing is that this is going to be sort of a small little add that I want to add here. So I'll have it match up the lines here, but I'm only going to have it probably come probably about here, and then I'll kind of, you know, blend it here and then go. So right now I'm just going to draw the outside line and then I'll worry about drawing the inside line. Okay, so I've got my little top part drawn out here. The area that you see up here is going to be the 1/2 inch flat felled seam that will match up with my bug netting, and then it'll blend in down there. Now I'm actually going to run into a problem down here. I already know that I am, because I'm doing 2 separate flat felled seams that are going to run into each other. And so when I get to that point, I'm going to have to do some finagling in order to get everything to work out exactly the way that I want it to and blend and look all pretty. So that's going to be an interesting challenge, but we'll work through it and we'll get it to work. Okay, so how does this little shelfie thing work? So what I've done is I've gone and laid it out so you can see how it will be. So imagine that the hammock is here, and this is sticking out from the side, and there'll be little guy lines from here that will go out. One thing that you'll hear a lot of people say is they'll say something called like sides together. So, you know, when we're talking about my hammock, which would be here, and what side I'm going to have, you know, be towards me and what side I'm going to have be towards the ground, I have to also do that for this, right? So I want it to match what I've already decided for my hammock. So what I did was, in here is going to be the dull side, okay? So that will match with my hammock. Like, for example, if I was sleeping here, right? So this will be dull, okay? And then I've done the same thing here. So the dull side has to be inside. So this side is like this side. So you put like sides together. So, and then this is the shiny side, right? And that's the shiny side. That way everything matches up all nice and pretty. So that's my shelf so far. So the next thing I have to figure out is how do I want these little guy line things just to work out. You know, I've been kind of waffling back and forth between doing a grommet, which I could do, or doing a little tie here. I think I'm actually going to do the tie. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to reinforce both sides here with some navy, some more of my navy fabric, so that way it'll look really sharp. Hi everybody! Oh, one more thing. I think I'm going to go visit Hammock Forum and surf around and do some more research on guy lines, because that will be fun. It's been really fun with you guys, preparing to hang with you.